We love being able to go to the different high school, colleges, middle schools to live broadcast sporting events around the area. Georgia Alabama Sports Live appreciates all the fan support, but without a presenting sponsor like Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC and Opelika, none of this would be possible. So we want to say thank you so much. Go to glennsmith.com. That is right, glennsmith.com. See all the inventory and see why people always say, get ready to smile. Thanks, everyone, and thank you to Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC for being our presenting sponsor. What's up, everyone? It is Thrift Barringer here with my partner in crime, Richie Rich Holdridge, and it's the Georgia Alabama Sports Live show. Back-to-back days. Normally, we don't do this. We do our show on Monday, and then we do it Wednesday, sometimes on Thursdays. But so much to cover this week. And with SEC Media Days happening right now, I just felt like, you know what? Let's go ahead. Let's do it back-to-back. And then, plus, we got an incredible guest lineup. Coming up later on, we have Jonathan Bam Rivers, who has his own show on Fox 54 called Move the Chains and on YouTube. This guy has been, for one, when I started my broadcasting career, I learned a lot from him, and just seeing what he's been able to accomplish and what he's doing now is incredible. So looking forward to talking with him. And then we're going to have on Bryce Coon, who works for LSU 247. And he also has a show that he does called The Crowded Booth, and he covers Auburn, Alabama, Georgia. So it's not just LSU, but he's actually in Dallas for SEC Media Days. So we're going to be talking all college football, little NFL too, with Bam, because he also not only does college, but he does pro as well. And we got to ask him some Falcons question. But we are presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. Richard, back-to-back days, man. So much happening. We had to do it.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've gotten to know Bam Rivers. I was a fan of his when I was listening to him back in 2019 with Sports Unleashed. And we're really just honored to have him, and called some of Georgia Alabama Sports Live football games with his son, Kingston Rivers. And they're going to be opening up the season against Shaw at Kinnett Stadium. And I know that Bam's going to be there in the stands like he always is for every Northside game. Just a proud father watching his son just tear it up in the backfield.
Yeah, and well, this guy also played at Auburn. He played for Shaw and won state championships. I mean, he has his own pedigree in terms of being successful on the football field. Quick couple of notes that we got to say coming up as you just watched, the Jordan sitting with an athletics director, state of the program. We sat down with Jordan AD, Russell Scott, and talk about all the Red Jackets programs and what they're looking forward to this year, as we've done with every AD that we covered. 16 of these that we're going to be dropping here in the month of July. And then Richard did the Jordan Coaches Show as the new basketball coach, boys basketball, new football coach, and then the baseball coach, correct? I know you got Coach Cobb.
I interviewed Coach Cobb, Coach Barnes, and Coach McDaniel. So you got two new, the basketball coach and the football coach is a new coming up this season for Jordan Athletics.
And it was a great job by doing that. And then, of course, we got the show that's going on right now. Tomorrow, Harris County, sitting with athletics director Mindy Johnson, will drop, and their coaches show. Thursday will be Northside. I sat down with Morgan Ingram and had a great conversation about the Northside Patriots. By the way, he brought up Kingston Rivers and Caden Clay, and thinking about this high-powered Northside Patriots offense. It is going to be probably the best offense around this area, with a veteran quarterback in Caden Clay with a bunch of weapons. Coach O thinks 2 years ago they won the region and went 10-1 or 10-2.
Yeah, they got to the second round of the playoffs, where they eventually lost to the two-time champion Warner Robins.
He thinks this team is just as talented as that team, and he's had players go to the Division I level these past couple of seasons. So looking forward to hearing from Coach Morgan Ingram from Northside. They also hired some new coaches, including the softball coach, Coach Carastori. Next week, we'll have Pacelli and Brookstone ADs. They're going to be having our interviews. They'll be dropping with their coaches' shows. And we're going to cross our fingers. I'm going to make a public service announcement right before we bring on our next guest. Central and Smith Station. I've gotten so many messages. And are you going to do the Panthers? Are you going to do the Red Devils this year? It is not for a lack of trying. I promise you that. We are trying to get over there, but it is sometimes hard to be able to sit down with a ultra busy athletic director in Matt Bell. We're hoping that we can have that conversation with him to promote Central Athletics. And same thing with Johnson, who is the AD over at Smith Station. But we can't make promises. But even if we don't get them, that's 14 schools that we were able to cover here, Richard. That's pretty incredible. And I like how we've taken it to another level, adding the coaches shows right after we sit with the ADs. And it's just giving exposure to these high school programs around the area that they deserve.
It really has. And we're also going to have Carver and Columbus as well. I think that when you think of just programs in Columbus, if you're outside of the Columbus area, you think of Carver for football because you think of all the great players that play in the NFL. You think of Columbus for baseball because Frank Thomas, Jordan Weems, Josh Lester. I mean, Columbus is an absolute baseball school, and what Coach Chad Mathis has done has been incredible, taking over for the legendary Coach Bobby Howard.
And I'm glad you brought that up because we also have Columbus sitting with the assistant athletic director, Richard, that
Right.
you were able to. That one's going to be dropping next week. Columbus, and then Spencer's Joseph Kegler, who's the head football coach, that will be dropping next week. So 4 more next week. For this week, we're just knocking them out. And before you know it, we are literally a couple of weeks away from broadcasting our first softball and volleyball game. And then August the 16th is the first football game. So but when it starts, it's never ending, and it's going to be going all the way through the months of May. And we are excited, and we appreciate all the schools partnering with us for this upcoming year. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring him on. His name is Jonathan Bam Rivers. He is a legend around this area, as I made mention. He was a heck of a football player back in his day, but he's also an incredible media guy that I love his analysts. I love the way he talks about college football and the NFL. He knows all sports, but specifically football. Thank you so much for joining us, Bam.
Thrift, Richard, I appreciate you guys having me today, man.
All right. There's a lot we're going to get into, but since it's the first time, hopefully of many times, you're going to be on Georgia Alabama Sports Live here throughout the season. Let's go ahead and get into the background aspect of it for our viewers or our audience that don't know who Jonathan Bam Rivers is. And I feel like there's very few of them, but there is some. Let's go and you just basically give your background, Bam, and what led you to now being the host of Move the Chains.
Absolutely, man. I'm a product of Shaw High School. Like you guys stated before, I played under Charles Flowers and played football and baseball there. Was all state in football. Ended up going to Auburn University, playing for a little while till I injured my back, but graduated from Auburn University and then moved back to Columbus probably around 06, 07, and coached at Shaw High School. And now I'm coaching youth football with my boys. And I really got into, radio and television the non-traditional way, right? Like I remember the press box with Bobby Z and Big Pun, and 3 of you are aware of Bobby Z. They kind of gave me an opportunity to kind of come on there first. I was a caller and just call continuously. But good friend of mine who's now big timer in this business, Josh Pate, who actually be a guest on my show this week, just kind of heard the way I talked about sports and reached out to a mutual friend we had through my wife and said, hey, I want to meet this guy. We talked and we ended up doing radio together down at CSU, ended up doing a football show together on television called Football Nightly down south on the CW, and really got it that way. So sports has always been a passion of mine. As a motivational speaker, those were some of the tools that I used. So I didn't go the traditional route, but it still has been able to come to fruition. I'm really blessed that it's an opportunity that I have right now.
Bam, one of the most memorable moments I remember from your broadcasting career was I was new to Columbus. I knew that there was just a passion for sports talk radio, and I think what Bobby Z did back in the early 2010s really set the tone. You had an opportunity to have your own show on Sports Unleashed with Bam and Reggie Reg. And I was captivated by your personality, just the way that you presented yourself and all the knowledge that you had. And going to where you were and then being able to go to Move the Chains. I mean, what are some of the other things that you attribute to your success as a broadcaster? Because I know that you're also a motivational speaker, and you really you have a lot of confidence when it comes to being in front of the camera and on air. So what are some of the things that got you ready just to be on the air and to have all the success you've had so far?
Well, first and foremost, man, any success that anybody thinks that I am having or have had or will have, all glory goes to God through my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I'm talking about just, again, when I talk about non-traditional, there are opportunities that everybody has in life, and there are things that people love to do, yet they don't understand how to take the next step to get to where they want their love to take them. And it really just kind of culminated in opportunities being presented to me simply because I was very diligent in everything that I did. And just being very diligent, like you said, Sports Unleashed, it was a great time, man, with Reggie Reg. Had an opportunity to really just talk about a multitude of sports. Over there, they was broadcasting from 4 to 7. Got to do the color commentary for high school football with Carlos Williams, like I'm still doing. A little sparingly now because my boy's in high school, of course, about to graduate. But just great fun, man. So really, I just think taking advantage of opportunities and, more importantly, being able to recognize opportunities when they come along. From Sports Unleashed, and went to Fox 54, where I was able to start doing, television segments for my motivational speaking and football there. Because the GM at the time, Jeff Gilbert, really recognized the talent that he saw in me and says, hey, you're going to have a football show here. He says, I don't know how long you're going to be with me, said, but I want to make sure we get the most that we can out of each other. So that opportunity was birthed even when COVID came. Because this was really supposed to be an opportunity during that time. But, of course, COVID sort of put the world on hold. But you can't ever put your dreams on hold, man. You just kind of find a way to keep grinding. So this is where we are now, man, and just blessed to be in this position. Just love talking sports, man. I love running my mouth, and I just get to do it for a living.
Very well spoken. And when you start talking, bam, everyone listens. I'm just going back. I mean, we had a few conversations back when I was a 21-year-old nugget that didn't know anything, that thought I knew everything. And man, I just going back to those days that you enlightened me. And really, I told Josh this all the time, Josh Pate, because I was able to help with y'all at CSU. I didn't know if I knew what I knew now, obviously everybody says that you would be more successful early on. But looking back at the things that we would talk about, and back then I didn't understand it, but now I view it as, man, that really enlightened me to when I got older and opportunities presented itself. I understand the work ethic, putting in the time, understand that you got to really harness your craft if you want to be great at something. And I always attribute that to you and Josh, Bam. But let's talk about Move the Change, because we're getting in the SEC. We're going to talk some Atlanta Falcons. But what is Move the Chains? What led you to want to do something like this? Because you're successful in everything you do. What motivated you to get back and doing a sports talk show on Fox 54?
Absolutely. Well, the passion never left. I just knew that. And honestly, I'm somebody like Pate, and I think this is where he is for a reason right now, is because we see things differently than a lot of people when it comes to sports. And this is no knock on the way anybody else calls sports. Everybody has their own niche and the way they do things. But I always look at things from a proactive standpoint and kind of beyond the surface. So the way I saw it is, anytime I'd watch a national radio show or listen to a national radio show or watch a national television show, and I'd make points, those points would sort of be counteracted. And I think it's God confirming, hey, this is something you can do at a national level. And I think that's the goal here. So Move the Chains was really birthed from my desire to talk about football, man, like you said, at the collegiate and the professional level. Everything from the name of Move the Chains, because it signifies what it means in football to actually get a first down and you move the chains, but it also signifies what you and I just alluded to, Thrift and Richard. Moving the chains means every day taking one step forward, getting a little bit closer to your goal. So in football, they're getting a little bit closer to that first down, a little bit closer to the end zone. Move the chains also signifies that for me in my individual life. So it's just a show, and it was really imperative that I let everybody know that the show is on weekly throughout the year. This is not just a reactive show. This is not just a show that's going to respond and react to highlights during the college and the NFL season. There's valuable content throughout the year. And I love it. We just started it in April, and it'll be going until I'm put in the dirt. God bless. So, I want people to understand that when football season ends, the content doesn't. So that's really where Move the Chains came from, and where it's going is, only God knows. But I think it's to the moon.
Well, Bam, there's no question about that. Like your former broadcast partner, Josh Pate, says, there is no off season.
Right.
I do think it's very unique that we all live in Columbus, where we have passionate college fan bases, including that school 45 minutes up the road, Auburn, Georgia, obviously Alabama. I mean, you're covering these teams, but you also have Florida fans, you also have Tennessee fans, you also have Clemson fans. Really, that passion for college football, because we know Josh Pate has it, and you have it too, Bam. What really motivates you to get up like on a Saturday morning and just you have a preview show? You want to react from that past week. There was probably a lot of upsets in college football. The college football landscape was shaken up, and now we got the 12-team playoff, and we could really have some fun with some college football playoff scenarios.
Well, and like you said, I think there's a vast array of opportunity, right? And I think it's not just reacting to what you see. It's sort of looking at what you see and asking yourself why. Well, why is this the way that it is? So, for example, if we're looking at the 12-team college football playoff format, you and I were talking about this before the show. You said, hey, I don't think it's a stretch to think that 5 SEC teams will get into the playoff. And I said it may be a stretch, but I said in my mind the goal is 25%, because I think a fourth of college football teams in the SEC are likely to get in, and then you move from there. But how does it impact everything else, right? Because where are we in college football now with the college football playoff format, NIL, the transfer portal? What all this means in my estimation is that it has become easier and harder at the same time for coaches, because it's easier for you to build a program. Because remember, if you transfer from a D1 school to a D1 school, you don't have to sit out like you did years ago. You can play immediately, and you can recruit and get people to transfer within the conference as long as it's done before the deadline that's set. So you have opportunities for teams like Florida, who I want to talk about in a little bit, right, who are trying to build their program, because Billy Napier is in a position now. I don't know if you guys have looked at Florida's schedule, but Florida could play 5 D2 schools to start the season and still have probably one of the top 10 toughest schedules in America this year. If you go on and look at who they have to play in November, and 3 of the teams they play are coming off of a bye. And we're talking about the role that Florida has. And now what are some people saying? Well, this is really an impediment to them. And I'm like, hey, this could be an opportunity for Florida, because they could likely play 5 top 25 teams in 1 month. Imagine Florida winning 4 of those games. Now, all of a sudden, they're probably a dark horse to get into the college football playoff, and where everybody looked at their schedule as something that was going to kill them, they may have taken advantage of it. So it's those little nuances to me that make college football great. Conference realignment is also a new thing. You got Texas and Oklahoma coming into the SEC, and I don't think this is going to be an issue for either Texas or Oklahoma. Both teams, especially Texas, always recruited nationally, right? They've got coaches who understand how to recruit nationally. Brent Venables, before he went to Oklahoma, is probably the best or one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. Steve Sarkisian understands what it is to win. He coached at Alabama under Nick Saban. He's been a coach in the NFL. So they're not in a position to where they're unfamiliar in my estimation. And remember, when Missouri hit the SEC, all they did was go to 2 straight championship games in their first 2 years in the conference. So it's not like a precedent hasn't been set with teams coming into the SEC, man. But I think the landscape of college football is going to be wild this year. I'm excited about it. And if you would have asked me when Peyton and I were doing the show 8-9 years ago, I was diametrically opposed to more than 4 teams, man. I was like, it's going to water down the regular season. It's going to suck. And I was like, now it really just makes it a little bit more intriguing, because with the buys that are instituted with the top 4 conference champions, and then not just getting into the college football playoff via the rankings, but then the reseeding. Because people are going to realize the rankings don't mean they're going to be the same as the seedings when it comes to the college football playoff committee. So, I mean, I think it's going to make a great regular season, a great opportunity for players. And this is another thing that I want you guys to think about, and everybody listening. A team that wins the national championship this year will probably play, about 17 games. If they play for a conference championship, right? So 16 or 17 games. What better way to prepare somebody for an NFL schedule than the way that college football is set up now? Because what do a lot of rookies have issues with when it goes to the NFL? I don't think it has anything to do with necessarily their skill set. I think a lot of them have the right mindset, those that start, but conditioning can get you beat. That's why you see some of the best teams. Health is definitely a thing. But now these teams are being prepared, and these players to go to the NFL off this long season if they're playing deep into it. And I'm not necessarily worried about their conditioning, because one thing about college, the best teams have what? They have depth. That's why recruiting is the lifeblood of college football. So the way I see it, man, I think college football has never been better. There are going to be some hiccups along the way with all these different changes, but I think it's thriving for the most part.
I'm with you. It's starting to embrace it. I mean, I've heard and I understand Pate still, he was anti adding the 12 playoff team, but it's happening at this
Yeah.
point. So now why not be intrigued and why not talk about the different scenarios? Because that's what we're doing right now is creating content, and they're giving us a buttload of content to talk about. I'm glad you brought up Florida, but I think let's stay within 45 minutes, and we'll hit on Alabama and Georgia here too.
Absolutely.
The Auburn Tigers. We on the Sports Vision radio show, we have on Mike G from the War Report, and he's really into the Auburn football program. He thinks Auburn this year going 8-4 would be a successful season. What is success in your opinion? I watch your show. You don't like predictions. That's not your thing. You're not doing win-losses, and that doesn't define being successful this year. So
Right.
what would be success for an Auburn team? Because, the fan base thinks 9-10 wins, but maybe 7 or 8 puts you in the right direction here for the future.
Well, I'll put it this way. In the last 4 years, Auburn hasn't won more than 6 games. So if they make it to 7 or 8 wins, I do think it'll be a success. But I also think it'll be a success if Auburn and Hugh Freeze are able to create some kind of identity, man. And I think that's one thing. If you watched Auburn last year or the last couple of years, can anybody tell me what Auburn's identity was? Whether they won games or lost games, because anybody definitively tell me this is what Auburn hangs their hat on. If everything gets tight and they need to get out of a situation, what is their identity? They don't have one. And I think that's where programs like the Georgias of the world, right, like the Alabamas of the world in the past, have really been able to hang their hats because they have an identity. At the end of the day, whether you lose a championship or you make it to the playoff or you don't, who are you at the core of your program? And Auburn is searching for that. Now, Hugh Freeze is a guy, of course, he's been in the SEC before at Ole Miss. I think he's done a great job in recruiting. I actually talked about Auburn on my show a few weeks ago, and I asked, are they a title contender or are they headed for a tailspin? And I think it's one of the most legitimate questions I can ask about any program in America, because the way that they've been able to recruit has been phenomenal. But let's think about why they've had to recruit the way they have, because they've been missing the mark a lot when it comes to traditional recruiting. The transfer portal is there for a reason, right? And I think it was Brian Kelly who said it earlier this week in the SEC Media Days, head coach of LSU. He said, if you have to replace people via the transfer portal, you didn't do a good job in recruiting. And I really agree with that, because the transfer portal can be used for that depth or to create more high-end talent, right? Like Ohio State when it got Caleb Downs and Quinshawn Junkins. Good gracious almighty, man. They probably got one of the best backfields in America. Georgia when it got Trevor Etienne from Florida in their own conference, not division anymore, but their own conference. So if Auburn wins 8 games, Thrift, yeah, I think it's a success. But I think it's more of a success if they're able to create an identity, if they can find structure in that program, and with the new coach staff that they have in terms of coordinators coming in on Hugh Freeze, him trying to cement his legacy as a top-tier head coach, because he's not there yet. He's been a top-tier recruiter and has been able to get people to his programs, but they haven't been able to get over that, what people like to call that proverbial hump. So, yeah, 8 wins will definitely be a success, but I'm looking deeper than the wins when it comes to the resume of Auburn and their overall commitment to the culture of that program.
And I think that's the best point that you made. It's the identity part, because winning 8 games, and it albeit however it may be, and it's nothing that you can hang your hat on to build off next year. It feels like another lost season. Go ahead, Richard.
Bam, let's talk Alabama.
Yeah.
Kalen DeBoer, first year. I think Bama fans just need to manage their expectations. We're not going to get another Nick Saban run like he did when he took over a decade ago. I just think that's unrealistic with NIL and the transfer portal. But I do feel that Kalen DeBoer is a good coach. I think that he is going to have success because he does have Jalen Milroe, who's a Heisman candidate. I think that Alabama has the resources and they still have the passionate fans to get players to come to Tuscaloosa. I think that this is a college football playoff team, but I think the days of them winning 2 straight national titles and then winning 6 under Nick Saban, I think those days are long gone. But really, what are the realistic expectations for Kalen DeBoer in year 1 at Alabama?
So in year 1, I think it's for DeBoer to establish the program that he is. And I'll say this, Richard, I think if people want Alabama to be Alabama under Nick Saban, they're delusional. If people want Alabama to still be a national championship contender, I think that's realistic. Right? You've already seen Kalen DeBoer come in and have one of the top 2 recruiting classes in the nation already. This guy, if you look at the NFL draft this past season with the stars he had in Washington, about 25% of his starting offense went in the first round in the NFL draft. So it's not like DeBoer can't recruit, right? And I don't think this is the same thing as a Brian Harsin move that Auburn made when they went and got him and brought him in the same way Alabama did. But this is also what I want to talk about. Alabama, I think, understands why they were successful. Why were they successful under Nick Saban? Because they trusted a head coach. Because listen, before Nick Saban got to Alabama, he was a good coach, but he wasn't Saban at Alabama before he got to Alabama. He had won a national championship with LSU and he was good, but nobody was putting him on the Mount Rushmores. But what happened? He came in at Alabama, and remember his first year at Alabama, they weren't good. They were mediocre, but he had to clean house, and he had to create an identity that was going to be his. So what did Alabama do with Kalen DeBoer? I think this was one of the best things you could have done. And I say that because I'm somebody who very much hates all these buyouts that these teams put in these contracts for these players. I don't like them. But what did Alabama do? They signed Kalen DeBoer to a 10-year contract, right? What does that mean? That means that they're committed to this coach for the long haul, because they know if they try to recreate, in my opinion, this is what they're thinking. If they try to recreate the Nick Saban era, they're possibly going to be disappointed. So you mean if DeBoer doesn't win a national championship in 2 years, let's fire him. Well, then if you do that, what's going to happen? You're going to see a mass exodus of players via the transfer portal, most likely. Then you're going to have to bring somebody else in, likely someone who may not be as good as DeBoer, right? Definitely wasn't as good as Saban. And there are only small number of coaches that Alabama would say we really want. The Kirby Smarts, the Dabo Sweeneys, and I don't think they're leaving their programs anytime soon. So I think committing to DeBoer, first of all, was a good thing. And I think secondly, for him to be able to come in, build the coaching staff the way he wants to build. And one thing Jalen Milroe said, who's a starting quarterback that you alluded to, Richard, Jalen Milroe was at practice during the spring and threw a touchdown pass. And he said he was looking to the sideline for the next play. And the board didn't give him the play. The offensive staff didn't give him the play. And he was like, hey, let's go. He was like, why didn't you celebrate? He said, well, I was just looking for the next play. That's how we do it here. He's like, no, the way we do it here is we celebrate when you make a big play. So go celebrate, and then I give you the play. He was like, okay. So to him, that said, okay, this is what's different now. So it doesn't mean it's better or worse than the way Saban ran things. But what Kalen DeBoer is not doing is trying to come in and live in the shadow of Nick Saban. He's going to win or lose the way he's going to win or lose. And I think that's what any successful coach has to do. So I'm not surprised, guys, if Alabama takes a step back. And by that, that means what I said earlier, not necessarily winning a national championship in the first year or two. Because you could easily see Alabama as the third, fourth, or fifth best team at best in the SEC this year. But Richard, according to you, like you said, Alabama could still make the playoff, which is a viable thing. So while I say it's harder for DeBoer coming in as head coach right after Saban, it's a little easier at the same time because there's a 12-team playoff. So if you get your foot in the door, anything could happen, right? So I think Alabama is in a good spot in terms of transition. And I'll say it again. If their expectations are be like Saban, you're unrealistic and you're crazy. If your expectations are be a national championship contender, I think that's valid.
I think that's a great point, Bam. And I think it alludes to something that I've been saying, and I want you to really piggyback off of it, is that maybe fans need to be okay with a 10-2 season and making the playoff, albeit Alabama. Look at their schedule. If they go 10-2 this year and they make the playoff, that's success, in my opinion, especially in the first-year head coach. Do you agree? Or do you think because how Alabama fans are, they need to learn to temper back? Like, what's your message, basically, to the fan bases with the SEC being as loaded as it is? The days of going undefeated, I think, are long gone or very few and far between.
Man, it's hard to tell a college football fan anything, especially an Alabama fan. I mean, they've been on the King of the Mountain for the past however long, right? But the thing about it is, I agree with what you're saying. 10-2, and you make the college football playoff, but you've seen it with Nick Saban. Not necessarily 10-2, but like an 11-1, right? I think there may have been one year Alabama may have made a playoff with 2 losses, depending upon if they were the conference champion. I can't think right now in terms of that. But my point is, you saw it under Saban, and even then, people were saying, well, Alabama's not undefeated. They didn't make the playoff. Well, Saban's time is done. And then the very next year, they just come back and win a national championship. There's nothing more prevalent in college football now than parity. And that's what I love. And a lot of people will think by parity, they think it means that teams who never got a shot are going to win national championships. No, I don't believe so. I believe more teams have an opportunity because the pool is bigger. Right? It's the law of averages, law of numbers. You get more teams, more people technically have an opportunity. But I think at the end of the day, people are going to be disappointed because it's going to be the usual suspects. The top tier teams in this country, when it comes to college football, are the top tier teams for a reason. They go out and get the best players. They go out and get the best coaches. They go out and get the best developers of talent, and they have the best game plans and the identity. I don't care who you are, that recipe will reign true for anybody. So if you're Alabama and they go 10-2 this year, even if they, guys, we know that more than likely whoever doesn't win the SEC is going to get into the playoff, right? I don't foresee the runner-up of the SEC championship game having more than 2 or 3 losses. Most definitely, I don't see it. If it happens, I'd be shocked. But then that would be a tall tale sign of where we are in college football. So making the playoff, Kalen DeBoer's first season would be phenomenal for Alabama. And if any fan thinks anything otherwise, I would just disagree. I'm not going to call them crazy because they might come after me, and I don't want their smoke right now.
Sitting on top of the mountaintop, though, right now is Kirby Smart in Georgia. I really don't, because they're so loaded talent-wise, Bam, and I watched you talk about them. Obviously, they're one of the favorites to win it all this year, as they should be. I think my biggest question with you, did you foresee this with Kirby Smart? I mean, the fact that we go from Nick Saban, that is unheard of these last 15 years, and the winning that he was able to do, and the Kirby Smart be able to do it so early in his coaching tenure. The man's not even 50 yet, and he's already got 2 national championships. Did you foresee this success, and do you think that he'll last another 15 years doing it? Because if he does, Bam, we got to start putting him in that conversation with Nick Saban or one of the greatest of all time.
Man, so I really, really thought Kirby Smart would be successful. I'm not going to say I thought he'd win back-to-back national championships and win, 44, 46, or 48 games in 3 years, whatever the crazy stat is. Right. I didn't know how successful. I knew he'd be successful. I thought he'd win a championship, but the way Georgia has dominated college football, and I love it because I always go back to, listen, I'm a broken record sometimes, but I understand what life is. If you watch Georgia under Kirby Smart, you could say basically was raised under Nick Saban. But Kirby Smart doesn't try to be Nick Saban. Kirby Smart was a player, an all-SEC defensive back at Georgia. And I don't want to transition too much, but if you pay attention to the Detroit Lions, their whole coaching staff almost is filled with former players.
Yeah.
Kirby Smart is a former player. He had Dale McGee, who's now the head coach at Georgia State, was a former player, one of the best recruiters in the nation. My point is, former players get it. They understand what it is to recruit, what it is to be coached, what it is to understand these young men. So Kirby Smart has a standard, and he coaches. He's an overseer, but he also coaches. I listen to things that Kirby Smart tells his players. He was talking about, I'm trying to remember who it was. I'm sorry, the name eludes me. But he talked about it when they played Florida State last year. Let's remember what happened to Georgia. Georgia lost to Alabama, their only game of the season last year, in the SEC title game, and didn't make the playoff. What did they do? They went out for the next month and a half. They practiced. They had players who were supposed to go to the NFL, who went to the NFL, still came back. And Kirby said these guys want to play with their teammates. And they came out and spanked Florida State, who I thought should have been in the playoff. But what was the mindset at Florida State? Well, we're not playing for a national championship. It really doesn't matter. And see, while it may not matter in terms of you winning a championship that year, it matters in terms of how you're building a program. And that's what Kirby Smart has done, man. So, like, Kirby Smart, even in the age of NIL, guys, Kirby Smart can look at a player, and the player can go to Kirby Smart and say, Coach, I want X amount of dollars, or I want this. Kirby can easily tell them no, let them leave, and still bring in somebody as good or if not better. And the one thing that I respect about Kirby Smart is that, I know this is a sensitive subject to some people, but, you know, the situation to where a couple of their players and the coach was killed tragically in an accident when it came to the driving, right, a few years ago. And Kirby Smart said, guys, we really have a problem here, and we need to get it under control. And see, that's just accountability. That's all it is. It's not him saying, hey, we're going to come here and be mistake-free for the next 5 years. No, that's not true. He was just acknowledging the fact that there were things with his program that were not desirable, nor were they right. Not just illegal, but just not right morally. And he said, we have to fix these things. That stuff transcends what happens on the field. But the reason it happens on the field is because that's how he talks to his players. So, man, they're going to have top-tier talent. They're going to have top-tier coaches. They're going to have top-tier results. That's just where Georgia is right now. And yes, Thrift, as long as he's at Georgia, I don't see it changing. I don't care what changes with college football. Kirby Smart is able to adapt. He's young enough. He's wise enough. He's seasoned enough. Just think about how young he is, but how long he's been coaching. He
Right.
knows what he's doing. And the scary part about it is he's still learning. So, congratulations, college football. This is what you have on your hands.
Bam, Falcons fans are tired.
Oh,
Three straight 7-10
Bam,
seasons.
you fired him up. When you went after Kirk Cousins, you fired him up, baby.
Look, hey, hear me out. Bam, Arthur Smith, not getting it done, 7-10. I can't believe that they had a quarterback just problem for the last 3 years because Matt Ryan felt he was underappreciated. Now they got Kirk Cousins. I do feel they have the quarterback to win this division and make the playoffs for the first time since 2017. And I do believe Michael Penix Jr. is that security blanket. We're probably not going to see him for 4 years now. They got the weapons. They got the quarterback. I do believe they got the coach. I do think that Raheem Morris, they should have gave him the job when he was the interim coach after they fired Dan Quinn. You talk Falcons on Move the Chains. Bam, what do you think the realistic expectations this year is for Falcons fans? And if they don't make the playoffs, do we blow it up again?
One, I love Raheem Morris. Like you said, he was a defensive coach in Tampa Bay. Love Raheem
Love
Morris.
him, yes.
I think he's phenomenal. He's won a Super Bowl with the Rams as a defensive coordinator, knows football as well. Two, I think the Falcons did the best thing ever when they drafted Michael Penix Jr., even after signing Kirk Cousins. Because the problem with NFL teams, guys, is that a lot of people are built to win now, and a lot of people try to build themselves to win later, but nobody wants to build now and later. Why, if you have a quarterback for the present, which they do, and Kirk Cousins, I'm going to get to that, and then you have a quarterback of the future, what's wrong with that? So everybody that killed the Falcons for drafting him in the first round, that's what I mean when I say I look at things differently. I'm not even a Falcons fan, and I was cheering my head off because it was a smart organizational move. So shout out to the front office of the Falcons for that. Now to Kirk Cousins. Okay, this is my thing. Kirk Cousins is an upgrade at the position. There is no doubt. For me to sit here and say he is not an upgrade would classify me as a hater or an ignoramus, and I'm neither, okay? He is an upgrade. Only thing I would ask is, can you not be an upgrade and still not good enough to lead your team to a Super Bowl? The answer is yes. Those things do not have to be mutually exclusive, and this is why. Let me ask you guys this question, because I posed it on my show. If Kirk Cousins averaged his career this year, 3,500 yards passing, 24 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, 67% completion percentage. That's what he's averaged in his career since he's been in the league. What would you say? Well, Falcons may be good enough. They may win the division. And I'm not saying 24 touchdowns is not going to be good enough because they could come out and run the ball well, right? With Algier and Bijan Robinson, they may come out and solidify, have a top 10 rushing attack. So I'm not simply saying his numbers have to be 45 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. My point is, if he averages his career, Kirk Cousins' ceiling has been playoffs and first-round exit or playoffs and get one win. And another thing I said was, well, I get it if he came from a team in Minnesota that didn't have weapons like he has in Atlanta. So do you mean to tell me while he was in Minnesota, he didn't have Adam Thielen? Oh, that's right, he did. In Minnesota, he didn't have Dalvin Cook. Oh, that's right, he did. In Minnesota, he didn't have Justin Jefferson. Oh, that's right, he did. In Minnesota, he didn't have TJ Hawkinson. Oh, that's right, he did. In Minnesota, before he got hurt, he didn't have Jordan Addison. Oh, that's right, he did. So the transition isn't like he's going from a bare cupboard to a full cupboard. That's all I'm saying about the Falcons. Are they good enough to win the South? I think so, especially when this has been a division where people can't win it in back-to-back years. Now, the Buccaneers are still going to have something to say about it. I don't think Carolina's ready. God bless Bryce Young. I'm praying for him now because it's not his fault, right? And I don't think the Saints because of Derek Carr. I think Derek Carr is who he is. I think he is who he is the same way that Kirk Cousins is who he is. The only difference is Kirk Cousins has won a game in the playoffs, right? So the Falcons are upgraded. My biggest question with them is on the defensive side of football, and I will say this. Nobody talks about it, I don't think. I haven't heard, and maybe somebody is. They made one of the best free agent signings this season and this offseason in Jesse Bates coming in from the Bengals. Jesse Bates has been phenomenal. And remember, the reason that the Bengals have been so phenomenal, even with Joe Burrow when he's been healthy, is because of their defense.
Yep.
And Jesse Bates was a big reason at free safety. So the Falcons bringing him in is huge. But can they stop the run is my issue. I think the Falcons can put up points, guys. But I've seen teams put up points and not necessarily do anything in the playoffs. I'm not saying they can't win the division. I think the Falcons have a high ceiling, guys. I think they have a ceiling of like 12, 13 wins. But I also honestly think they have a very low floor, because I'm not even just talking about Kirk Cousins' injury, because everybody made a big stink about them drafting Michael Penix Jr., Kirk Cousins and his agent having a problem with it. Well, what if something happens where Cousins does struggle early on in the season, and then Raheem Morris does not know whether or not he wants to go with Penix or Kirk Cousins? That stuff can have an adverse effect on the team. I'm not saying it will. I'm simply saying, understanding where the Falcons have been, there's a reason they've been there. Everybody said the same thing about the New York Jets. They're a quarterback away. They were never a quarterback away. You know why? Because the reason that Aaron Rodgers got hurt, because their O-line sucked. And it sucked before he got there with Zach Wilson. It was just easy to blame Zach Wilson because he wasn't that good. O-line was terrible. Aaron Rodgers gets hurt in the fourth game of the season because their O-line is still bad. So if you're a Falcons fan, be excited. You've got two quarterbacks on your roster that can win you games. You should be one of the most excited franchises in the NFL. And I'm going to say it again. He is an upgrade. Doesn't mean I think they're an NFC championship contender or a Super Bowl contender, because I can think of 5 teams in my estimation that are better than the Atlanta Falcons. I think the 49ers are better. I think that the Seahawks will be possibly better this year. I think the Rams could easily be better. They're all in the same division. Tampa Bay could be, because they won a division last year, but Atlanta has firepower offensively. If you look at the East, I think the Eagles will be better. I actually don't think the Cowboys will make the playoffs, guys, so I'm just throwing that out there now. So, and of course, with the North, the Lions, the Packers are both phenomenal. So I'm not saying the Falcons won't make the playoffs. I'm not saying they can't win the division. But if the Falcons go to the Super Bowl, I will then go on my show and come back on your show and said I was wrong, because I didn't think it was possible with Kirk Cousins, and I was only going off what he's shown me for the past decade and 2 years.
His name is Jonathan Bam Rivers. You love everything we just talked about. You get it on a weekly basis with Move the Chains. Where can everybody find the show? What time does it come on? Where are the other platforms it's on? Floor is yours. Tell us where everybody can find it, Bam.
Absolutely. Move the Chains every Saturday morning on the Sports Leader, WXTX Fox 54, 9:30 a.m. Eastern, 8:30 Central. Every Saturday. You can also watch it on YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. It's at move_the_chains. Every Saturday morning, all year long, 9:30 a.m., 8:30 Eastern on the Sports Leader, WXTX Fox 54. Also catch Move the Chains on YouTube at move_the_chains.
Bam, I hope
subscribe.
This is – yes, for sure, subscribe. Bam, I hope this is one of many times you're going to be on throughout the year. Thank you so much for joining us, man. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, and look forward to talking to you real soon.
Hey, appreciate you guys, man. Before I go, shout out to Russell Scott, AD at Jordan, because he was my coach when I was in middle school and my teacher. And then shout out to Joe Kegler, who's a good friend of mine, the head coach over there at Spencer. And then, of course, Morgan Eagles, a good friend of mine. He's an AD at my son's school, Northside. So good thing that you guys are doing. I love the opportunity. Great job. Keep doing what you're doing. And I'll catch up with you guys later, man. God bless y'all.
Thanks, Bam. We'll be watching later on this Saturday. That's Jonathan Bam Rivers. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Bryce Coon on the Georgia-Alabama Sports Live Show. You're watching right now the Georgia-Alabama Sports Live Show that is presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. Get ready to smile. We'll be right back after this.
Welcome to the Campus Academy Private School, where every student is celebrated for their individuality. With personalized curriculum, students unlock their potential, growing into confident learners. At the Campus Academy, we give teachers the freedom to create dynamic classrooms where every student's voice is heard. Discover the difference. Enroll your child today and watch them thrive.
Make your way to Glenn Smith Chevrolet. Choose America's #1 compact SUV, the Chevy Equinox. Discounted up to $6,500 off. Chevy's full-size pickup truck, the powerful Chevy Silverado, is up to $12,000 off. And big Chevy Silverado 2500 HDs are discounted up to $6,000 off. Plus, enjoy no payments until fall. Make your way to Glenn Smith Chevrolet in Opelika.
Get ready to smile.
I'm smiling. Richard's smiling. Man, what an incredible show. And let's go ahead and bring him on. We've been having him wait long enough. We've been trying to set this up for quite a while. Me and him actually went to the same church together. We've both had this same dream, and it's pretty cool watching both of us on this upward climb. Now, he's a lot higher than I am because the guy's incredibly talented. His name is Bryce Coon of the Crowded Booth and LSU 247. Appreciate you joining us, man.
Thrift, I appreciate it, man. Richard, appreciate it as well. And
It's kind of crazy. I don't think when we were at Evangel Temple, we quite knew we'd be doing this, man. But time flies also. I was reminded when I got out of bed this morning that I can't stay up as late playing the college football game as I did when I was 13, 14 years old.
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll get into that here in just a moment. And by the way, going back to those Evangel days, man, we used to talk sports. Me, you, Ralph, my friend Jacob Fowler. We used to have heated conversations. So the groundwork was laid at Evangel. It was Evangel Temple back then. And now you see what it's turned into. All right, Bryce, so much has happened. But just like I did with Bam, we got a lot we're gonna get into, but let's go into your career. What led you to where you're at now? So start from the beginning to how you got this opportunity with 247.
Yeah, like Thrift said, I mean, grew up in Columbus, Georgia, and it really just kind of started as every, I guess, I want to say every, I don't want to put that on everyone, but every kind of sports, commentator starts with someone tells you can't play anymore. So that was one of the big deals. Like, hey, you can't play anymore. You're not good enough. So you try to find a way to stay into it. And like Thrift said, I mean, all the conversations at the lunch table that you have at school, I said, man, if I can get paid to do this, this is be a pretty nice gig. So yeah, no, I went over. I went to Berry College in Rome, Georgia, really small school, and one of the great things they had was kind of this work program where you got to, I got to work for like the local little TV station there in that area and radio, and then just kind of got started with that, and then obviously created my own podcast and brand, and then just kind of took all of that into really kind of diving into high school recruiting, which look, I mean, you guys cover a saturated area in that, obviously in this Chattahoochee Valley area. I mean, we all know that, but Georgia's just nuts when it comes to this stuff. So really started to get into that. It kind of parlayed into a couple internships with 24/7 Sports. Started covering Georgia State, Georgia Tech as well, and then just recruiting in the state of Georgia. And then, as everyone, when you grow up, in my case, you get married and now you have a little one, you got to kind of find something that's a little more stable. So when they came calling with an opportunity to move to Baton Rouge, I mean, there's a lot worse places to spend a Saturday night than Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I will tell you that. But it's been a blessing. It's been a lot of fun, and man, just enjoying every single second of it because. And I know you mentioned earlier, it's one of those things where you grow up wanting to do stuff like this, and you really don't want to take it for granted. The opportunities and the games and those moments that you get to cover.
Well, not only did you do all that, but you also did play-by-play for ESPN Plus.
Yeah.
Honestly, Bryce, and I'll admit this, the play-by-play aspect, never really thought that was something I'd be interested in. The opinionated stuff I've always wanted to do, but just seeing you, how great you were, it just enticed me like, man, maybe there's something into this. Maybe it is fun. And talk about that aspect in play-by-play, and do you miss it? Do you still open a door that maybe that could be something you turn into later on? Like, what was that like, being able to do it?
Yeah, no, and you mentioned that, and I didn't even get to that part, but it's definitely a piece of the puzzle. That was kind of the first love for me, actually. I wasn't as necessarily into the hosting. I had done some things with the radio station in Rome just to kind of open some doors, doing some high school football up there, and benefited from being able to be a sideline reporter for a game between, at the time, it was Justin Fields against like the Adam Andersons in the world against Rome High School. It was a nuts Harrison versus Rome game up there when I was in school. So that just kind of opened some doors. You do whatever you can, whether it's producing, whether it's anything. And so play-by-play was kind of the big thing that I wanted to do growing up. And, just to be able to have opportunities, did Georgia Tech baseball on the radio in Atlanta for 2 years. That was a lot of fun. Got to talk about a lot of fun ACC matchups and travel across that ACC landscape, which is a lot of fun. And then just the ESPN Plus, whether it was, softball over at Clemson, volleyball at Georgia Tech, and then just kind of parlaying that with doing a lot of stuff down at Mercer as well, and working with their football broadcast and their radio team. So, you asked Thrift, is it something that I would still love to do? Of course. Play-by-play is just one of those things where people they don't give up on those jobs very easily. So it's, to not be too kind of forward. It's one of those things. It's like, either people, they do that job until they die, or they step away. And so it's one of those things where when the time came, and I've been able to do some high school stuff, did high school playoffs down in Louisiana, which was a lot of fun. Pronunciation guides were a little bit more interesting than you get in the state of Georgia, especially with some of the high schools. But, keeping that open and always open to opportunities. But that was a piece to the puzzle where, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, you can't really replicate the feeling of calling big moments and big opportunities.
Well, Bryce, talk a little bit about the Crowded Booth. I happen to listen to it. It's also on the same radio station that I have my podcast. I think you do a fantastic job. And your success story really growing up in Columbus and now you're in Baton Rouge. I mean, it's really been a success for you. But also, Crowded Booth is very unique because I don't think anybody talks about Georgia Tech football like you do. It's like if I want to know more about Georgia Tech football, I'm going to listen to Bryce Coon. And I think that you have found your niche and you found your target audience. And also just I've heard Ralph Leary on your show. You've had other guys on your show, but just talk about that relationship you have with your co-host and really what got you to start the Crowded Booth and where it was and where it is now being as successful as it is.
It's kind of crazy. And I don't know if Thrift knows this, but when I was about a sophomore in college, I was at a small school. I didn't go to a journalism school. So it was one of those things where you weren't, and I'm always respectful. And look, people who go to those schools, it's great, but you're not, you kind of handed opportunities, when you go to the big journalism schools, the big J schools at times. And so for me, it was like, what can I create on my own? And I actually called Dale Williams and DJ Jones and said, hey,
Wow.
this is kind of my passion. I wasn't in Columbus at the time and was doing stuff up in Rome in school, but, what do you suggest? And they were like, create your own brand. And that's really kind of started and so it's kind of crazy. Just going back, we started that in 2018 and it really kind of just started off as an interview show, not a lot of live shows. We would just book guests. We had a great relationship with the single A Braves team, the Rome Braves up there. And so I was able to get, a couple guys on, that were in the minor leagues at the time for them. We had Mike Soroka on, which was a lot of fun, and we talked with him. So just different guests. So we started that. And then, I mentioned earlier that I covered Georgia Tech with 24/7 Sports and just noticed that, and you guys know this, in the Atlanta market, and I hate to say this for Tech fans, it's a Georgia market. It's a Georgia-dominated market. I mean, you go to a Dick's Sporting Goods, you go to an Academy Sports, and there's all red and black. There's a few white and gold stuff. So I saw an opportunity to kind of, and even radio stations. I mean, look, Georgia Tech was not good after Paul Johnson. And so there was not a lot of market for it, but there were still fans that wanted content. So just kind of like with my background doing, I said, well, let's just launch this. We'll do like a weekly live show during the season where we kind of take a look at what happened, take a look at, the preview in the next game. And man, it's turned into a whole different arm of kind of the Crowded Booth to where it's it gets crazy. There's look, as every college football fan base has fanatics. That's the reason they're termed and coined those. So we have a lot of fun. We do 2 to 3 live shows a week with those guys. We have a lot of the recruits that commit. We try, we've built a great relationship with a lot of coaches on the staff, just being able to talk with them and just different stuff. And, so that's been a big arm that kind of helped us. And then to your last point there, Richard, I mean, just like Thrift said, I mean, we all grew up in Columbus. Ralph Leary and I knew each other since we were 5, 6 years old playing baseball over at Northern Little League. And so it was one of those things where I was like, hey, and then Will Manis as well. We all grew up playing Little League and we all sat at the lunch table and talk sports. Hey, let's do this. And, just some of the feedback I've gotten from people, like if you want and I say this, we keep things professional, but I say this in the best terms of like, if you want like the professional button-up sports talk, you're going to go to your ESPNs, your CBSs, your Fox Sports. Like that's what you're going to go to. But I think a lot of people like you guys do, they can relate with good chemistry and just they can see themselves in the host when they're talking because it's like, hey, that's what my buddy and I were talking about at work the other day type of stuff. And that's what makes it fun. So we have a great relationship. We have a ton of fun. We've got a lot of fun stuff planned, this fall. And we're excited for it. Just kind of kicking off another college football season where, we love college football. You can talk about it year round now, just about with everything, transfer portal, conference realignment, all those different things. So it's been really good. We've enjoyed it a lot. And, when you get to do it with your best friends too, it doesn't feel like a job.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think that's a great point that you made mention. I hope all the young broadcasters that are out there listening, don't try to emulate ESPN, CBS, Jim Rome, Colin Cowherd. They're great at what they do. Heck, even a Josh Pate, that they have their own unique niche and they found their niche in what they do. You got to find yours. And I think that's what's so unique about you, Ralph and Will. It's like at a barbershop. You're just sitting around at a bar, having a couple of beers, talking sports, shooting the crap, and that's what people like. They really do. And then you interact with people too. And then that's the biggest thing is that you let the people that comment, you bring them on or bring their comments on the show. That's always awesome. You're actually in Dallas right now. So I guess that's what we're transitioned to. What is it like? Because I've been at media days the previous two in Nashville and Atlanta. Me and DJ did not make the drive to Dallas this year. So what is it like? Is it bigger and better in Dallas? How's everything happening there? I know Brian Kelly was yesterday. So how's it been for you?
Yeah, well, first off, it's always great to have the team that you specifically cover go first on Monday morning because you get your work done and then you get to hang out in the great city and network and talk with people the rest of the week. So that's kind of been my plan. And then also playing a little, EA college football. It's not too shabby either. But no, look, when they announced last year, Thrift, that they were going to be in Dallas, a lot of people were like, okay, well, here comes Texas, running the conference, making demands. And, I would say that, I've been to the one in Atlanta. I've been to, when they used to have it in Birmingham. I've been also, obviously, in Nashville last year. Dallas is unique. I think you see it as much kind of like Atlanta in the terms of, it's a mecca of sports. I mean, guys, we got the SEC Media Days. We got All-Star game tonight, like 20 minutes away. So it's just a nuts time to be in the city of Dallas. But it's been a lot of fun. It's a little bit bigger. A little bit, more Texas barbecue that you can go get, a nice steak. We went to a steakhouse on night one, so that was a lot of fun. So, yeah, Brian Kelly went night one. Kirby Smart, obviously today, Josh Heupel, Drinkwitz as well, Shane Beamer yesterday, and then we got 2 more days of kind of just covering what is a just wild and wacky time. But it is interesting there, Thrift. Radio Row has noticeably cleared out after like 1 or 2 o'clock. And the running joke has been it's because of this new college football game. And it happened yesterday, and like barely anybody was talking with Clark Lee and Vanderbilt. And I was like, come on, I know they're not projected to win a lot, but they stuck Clark Lee and Vanderbilt in that 4 p.m. slot yesterday at the same time as the release date of the game. So it is what it is.
All right, let's talk about LSU because then we're going to hit on all the other schools. And I want to preface my statement that I just made yesterday about LSU. I think they're the sleeper team of the SEC. I think many SEC predictions have them 5th or 6th, which, by the way, if you're 4th or 5th in the SEC, you can still make the goddamn playoff. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. But 2, I think people see you lose Jaden Daniels, you lose the wide receivers, the offense not going to be as high-powered as it was last year. That means you're going to take a step back. I find that hard to believe when you hire one of the best defensive minds in college football. Your defense has got to get better. It can go nowhere but up. You got Harold Perkins, who's probably the best defensive player in the country, and Brian Kelly's in year 3. That means now he's got his team. Do you believe LSU, even replacing Daniels and Neighbors, that they have what it takes on offense enough to be able to, with that talented defense, be a contender in the SEC in the playoff?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of labeled them, and I haven't done official predictions yet, but I've kind of labeled them as a team that, is, to me personally, kind of a fringe playoff. I just need to see a little bit out of the defense. And it can't get any worse. But to me, it's got to get marginally better with some of the games they have on their schedule. And we talk about beating some playoff-worthy teams, especially playing in the SEC. Like they're going to host Alabama, host Ole Miss, host Oklahoma, host UCLA, and they're going to go to Vegas and play USC. There might not be a lot of defense, in some of those games, but there's going to be some offense. So can you get big stops? Can you create negative plays? Can you create turnovers? So that's kind of where I sit with, LSU. But to your point, I mean, look, this was the number 1 offense in the country last year. You literally had the best quarterback in the country in college football, best player. You had 2 receivers that were just lights out. And it was a nightmare for defenses to cover. And let's don't forget that Jaden Daniels wasn't just a throw with his arm. He's probably been one of the best dual threat quarterbacks that we've seen in a long time, just with his ability, his precision, and just his awareness to pull the ball down and run. I mean, a lot of people say that, that Florida game was one where he kind of cemented his Heisman status, the 2 massive touchdown runs last year. So when we fast forward to 2024, do I expect him to be number 1 in the country in total offense? No, that would be a tall task. Top 10? Yeah, why not? Because you promote, yes, you lose your offensive coordinator to Notre Dame, but this was a big collaborative effort, kind of much like, Georgia did 2 years ago when Monken left to go to the NFL. They promote Bobo. And they even had at the time now Georgia Tech's offensive coordinator Buster Faulkner. This was a collaborative effort of 3 or 4 guys. So Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, were both promoted to the co-OC positions. They worked exclusively with this pass game last year. Joe Sloan has been phenomenal with quarterbacks. And you have a guy in Garrett Nussmeier, who we talked, with this week already, and I talked with down at the Manning Passing Academy. He is a rare case in college football. But the fact that he has stayed and not transferred out.
Right.
He is a coach's son by all the, all the way. Like just how he talks and just the answers he gives, you can tell this kid's been coached up on what to say. So you have a guy who's a leader. He's respected in the locker room because the fact that he has put his head down, continued to work, continued to develop when it would have been really easy for him to say, you know what, I'm going to leave and go somewhere else. And guys respect that. Offensively, you lose the 2 receivers. They've got a lot of talent. You guys know this. LSU is always going to have a couple dudes at receiver position that people might not really think, in preseason, but about 4 or 5 games in, they're like, okay, that kid could probably go first round. Like that's going to be the next dude that goes to the NFL. So offense, I feel fine, Thrift, but defensively, you bring in the highest paid defensive coordinator in Blake Baker. I love Blake Baker. Like the amount of times I've seen him at practice, this is a guy who I wrote today. He laces up the cleats and practices with these guys. And, I mentioned that to Harold Perkins and to Brian Kelly, and they said, it's infectious. It's an infectious energy that we needed. And they even listed as this might have been the missing piece. So everything that they were saying kind of falls along with what you're saying is like, why not LSU? We know what Georgia is. We know that Alabama, and I heard you guys talking about earlier, like I don't expect Alabama to take a massive step back. They still have a lot of talent, and I think DeBoer is a really good coach. But once you kind of get past that, look, Texas, I think, is going to be really good, but Texas lost a lot of the defensive line, and their D-line coach is now the defensive line coach at LSU. That's kind of a big question mark. So could LSU be the 3rd or 4th best team in the SEC? Why not? And then if you're talking about things clicking, why couldn't they beat Alabama? They've already beat them one time when they came down to Tiger Stadium, so they're going to get that opportunity this year. And, I don't think it's out of the question to say that LSU could find themselves playing in Atlanta in December for a potential bye in the playoff. That's a lot of things got to go right, but it's not the craziest thing.
Bryce, with 2 more days left of SEC Media Days, which coach are you looking forward to hear and speak?
Or who have you heard from in the
exactly. Because you got a Kirby Smart that went today.
Yeah. So I'll start with, Kirby Smart. Obviously, a lot of the attention's been on kind of what's happening off the field, up there. And he talked about today, they actually dismissed a safety, earlier today from the program, said he was no longer with the program. And then this whole thing about, they're finding players through the collective is finding players who are, breaking these rules, which, 5-6 years ago was not a real thing, but now it is an interesting way to punish players. We'll see if that's something that, continues in terms of like, if that's a method that works. So, hearing Kirby Smart talk, look, he's the definition of coach speak, guys. He's a guy that he's going to have the coach speak factor. He is going to say all the right things. You're not going to learn a ton about them other than the fact that, hey, they're going to be pretty dang good again this year. And it's a matter of, are they going to go undefeated or are they going to drop a couple games along the way? I will say, too, the one guy I was really interested in talking to, and we got a chance to, was Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach of Missouri, because that's another trendy pick. It's another really trendy pick. And we've been kind of high on Missouri on our show and just – what they return, I think they have one of the more underrated receiving corps in the country. Luther Burton is a problem. You look at other weapons that they have. They lost Cody Schrader, but they brought in a really good running back tandem, a kid from App State and a kid from Georgia State, 2 of the Sun Belt's best last season. And then you bring back your quarterback. So anytime you can bring back weapons like that, you feel good. Now, lost to DC like we were talking about. And so, I asked Drinkwitz that question. He said that the hope is when you take a head coaching job, you want your guys to get plucked and go somewhere else. That's the whole point. Now, obviously, you would have liked Blake Baker to go be a head coach somewhere, but when you're talking about Missouri to LSU, that's just a brand value type of thing. You can't turn down a job like that. So, but he mentioned he hopes that the culture stays the same, the chemistry stays the same, and that they can begin this seamless process of where maybe they lose their OC the next year. Maybe they lose their next DC. But you start to see continuity form within the program that leads it to be one of the SEC's best. And so, look, it's a schedule for Missouri that I think is very, very manageable in terms of how they could navigate it. But I like what Missouri brings to the table. He was a guy that I was really interested to hear from. And then, the last one that I'll be excited to kind of hear from, and obviously, in y'all's neck of the woods over there in Columbus, is Hugh Freeze, because I don't know how much you want to go into this. I mean,
Go ahead.
Hugh Freeze
Go ahead.
for me, look, I've been watching Cam Coleman since he was about 7 or 8 years old. That kid has always been a dude. Little league, pee-wee football, he's just always been a guy. Terry Thompson, Auburn has weapons. It is going to straight up come down to the quarterback position, in my opinion. The offensive line's got to be better, sure, but you got a veteran running back. You've got some other complementary pieces in the backfield. Is Peyton Thorne the guy? And this is what you hired Hugh Freeze to do. So I don't want to say, because last year, I don't know if you remember this, Thrift, last year Hugh Freeze was kind of very vocal about the fact that, our roster's not there yet. We're not at the top of the SEC. Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's there yet in terms of the Georgias and the Texas and the Alabama, but when you look at the middle tier of the SEC, there's not any reason Auburn should be worse than Kentucky. There's not any reason they should be marginally worse than Tennessee. They should be better than potentially Florida as well. So I think Auburn needs to emerge from this kind of bottom tier, mid tier of the SEC this season. Because, look, Auburn fans are crazy. I grew up around them. They love their Auburn football, and they will put pressure on this program to be good. You can't fall behind. So Hugh Freeze is going to be the one that I've kind of got circled as a guy that I'm interested to see what the questions are, from the national media and from other beat writers, but just as well as how he kind of what's the theme? What's the narrative because every coach is pushing one that he's pushing this summer heading into the fall.
His name is Bryce Coon, 247, crowded booth. I'm going to say this, and you don't have to piggyback off it unless you want to. It was a hot take from yesterday. Was spewing out hot takes. Shane Beamer in South Carolina. For one, it was a snooze fest when I listened to him talk. I don't know how y'all do it. If you looked around in the area, because I'm talking about last year, I saw people actually trying to stay awake when he talks. That's one. But two, Steve Spurrier did something to South Carolina that I think ruined South Carolina fans for the long term. From 2010, 2011, he won 10 or 11 games, ranked in the top 10, brought in top 10 recruiting classes that has never been done, and I don't think ever will be done at South Carolina. So they are chasing after something that I think is unreasonable, because Steve Spurrier is one of the top 5, top 10 coaches of all time. That's what you need. And he still didn't win an SEC championship just to be successful at that level at South Carolina. So my question is this with Shane Beamer. He goes 6-6 this year. Do you fire him? If he goes 7-5 with that schedule, do you fire him? I think that's a success off of what you're bringing in and who you're playing. I think that's successful. And I think going 8-4, 9-3 would be above and beyond at South Carolina. Now, South Carolina fans probably don't want to hear that. But what's your take on the Gamecocks? Because I feel like they think SEC championships within their realm, and I just don't know. I'm not putting them in the Vanderbilt category. God bless Clark Lee. But I just feel like they're in that Kentucky where if you have a 9 or 10 win season every 3 or 4 years, you should be happy with that.
We actually I had Shane Beamer on our podcast back in May, May or April. And we talked with him just about the expectations. And, it's different when you're hearing a coach talk about it. You want to be great. We want to do all these things. And that's what he's supposed to say. Fans would be pissed if he was sitting here saying, well, we're going to be okay. 7-5, 6-6 with a 7 win, and the bowl game's going to be fine. But Thrift, I'm with you. I'm all about realistic expectations. The SEC just got harder. South Carolina's ceiling to me before that was kind of like a 8-9 win program. If you did reach a 10-win mark, that was okay, we hit everything right. We found the right quarterback. We found the right playmaker, to do different things. 7-5, if you go 7-5 and you win an 8th game in the bowl game, 8-5, that's going to keep you in the top 25 in recruiting, top 30 in recruiting. It's going to keep, his job safe. I think that you have to differentiate between the fans' expectations and what is the expectation in that athletic administration office. If it is to compete for an SEC title year in, year out, well, that might not be realistic. I mean, I think that, South Carolina's a program that should have a floor of 6 wins a year. They should flirt with 7 to 8. And if you get to 9 and 10, then you're talking about a loaded conference. 9 or 10 wins might get you to the playoffs. So, if you flirt with a playoff berth every 3 to 5 years at South Carolina, you're doing a heck of a job. But I was talking the other day with somebody. I grew up a Georgia fan. I hated when Georgia played South Carolina week 2 every single year. Partially, and I can joke about this now, is because Georgia always had about 3 or 4 guys that were ineligible going into that game. And then you had to face Steve Spurrier. I was talking with the South Carolina guys, over here, last night about it. I was like, I remember it was 2012. Steve Spurrier's the head coach. Georgia goes up there as a top 15 team, South Carolina with Connor Shaw, and they destroy Georgia 35-7. So, look, it's a great atmosphere. It's a fun place to play. LSU goes there this year. But I'm with you, man. I mean, you have to recalibrate your expectations if you're a South Carolina fan and you want to be at the top of the conference, or you expect to. You can always want it, but to hold any coach to that standard, I don't know who you're going to get to coach there, because I don't think Beamer's an awful coach personally. I think he has some growing up to do as a head coach. But I do think that, man, you got to recalibrate if that's your year in, year out expectation.
I got to add one more thing, Richard, before you ask a question about what a time to be alive in 2012. Because after that game, Mark Richt, he had that same face no matter if they were winning or losing. And the Georgia fans that wanted him fired immediately after that game, because also Brett Muskinger and Kirk Herbstreit were there. It was college game day. I mean, it was a big deal. It was the biggest letdown, I think, of Aaron Murray's career. Even though Georgia went on to play in the SEC championship game and could have beat Alabama, I remember that very vividly. For all the Georgia fans. Go ahead, Richard.
Well, Bryce, I think that Texas and Oklahoma are going to have a rude awakening. I know their fan base thinks that they're going to dominate this conference. Not so much. Even though I think Texas is one of the top teams in the SEC, I think realistically they're going to play a tough schedule and have 2 or 3 losses. Same with Oklahoma. I have not really been a believer in Oklahoma. I felt even in the Bob Stoops era, the Lincoln Riley era, they got a lot of breaks and they played a lot of weak opponents. And but don't get me started on 2003. They had no business being in the national championship game. I think Oklahoma is a 7-5 team, an 8-4 team. But the you're around the fans, especially here in Dallas. What are the Texas and Oklahoma fans talking? Do they feel that they're going to own this conference, or are they going to be in for a big surprise?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what Nick Saban said yesterday. They're not going to come in and run the SEC. And if you kind of look at the actual history of Big 12 championship berths, they didn't even run the Big 12. Like, really.
Right.
Like, I mean, there's such a big brand that it felt like they did, but they really didn't. I mean, the Big 12's been a bloodbath conference over the past couple of years. It's just survived to December if you're in that conference. But, I'll start with Texas. Covering LSU, there's a ton of recruiting battles that Texas and LSU wage on one another. They've got money. We all know that. And we can talk about that publicly because of NIL. So they're going to be a player. They're going to be one of the top players in, recruiting. It's all about development. Can you take those guys? And I'll even say this, where Georgia has done so well and Alabama did so well, the 5-star guys are going to be good. But where you make your money, you win championships is the 3-star kids, the Lab Conkeys of the world that you just turn around and you develop into these studs. And I think that's where Texas has got to learn to make up ground, because you're not going to be able to win on talent alone, like you alluded to, Richard. It's too loaded of a conference. When you look at programs like a Mississippi State, a Kentucky, a South Carolina, you can't just expect to roll in there like you're playing, Iowa State or someone like that, or TCU. It's not the same thing. I think Texas I have them as a tier 1, in between tier 1 and 2 in the SEC, just based on the talent they return. I think Quinn Ewers is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. We could see that, maybe, but I don't think they're going to go undefeated. Now, a lot of Texas fans, I think I can't tell if it's more towards the A&M fans that they're just doing this, trying to spite them, or if it's an actual belief. Who knows? Which I'm all in favor of spiting A&M fans. But I will say, I think that there's a realistic expectation of we're not going to go undefeated. And Thrift, I know you mentioned it with Bam earlier. It just feels like that era is over. If you go undefeated in the SEC, let's just give you the trophy now.
Right.
Don't even worry about playing a 12-team playoff.
Right.
So, so Texas for me, I mean, I could see 9-10 wins. That's where they should sit. I mean, they've got the money, they've got the resources, they should have the coaching to get there. And then Oklahoma, it's hilarious you say this, because Ralph, Will, and I recorded an episode on this, and we're releasing it tonight on Tuesday night about this. Oklahoma's over-under win total is 7.5 this year. And for some reason, when I was looking at that, I was like, I just want to take the over on it. I don't know what it is, but I do like Brent Venables as a defensive coordinator. I will say that. If Brent Venables can build a defense that could be formidable enough to keep that offense in games as they grow. They got a brand new quarterback in Jackson Arnold. He's supposed to be the real deal. We'll see. Then I think they could be in the middle tier of the SEC, which probably puts them, Richard, right about where you were saying. A 7 to 8 win team, occasionally challenging, for that third or fourth spot and making a playoff. But they're going to have to recruit at a better level, in my opinion. They're going to have to recruit at a way that they probably haven't in a long time. And even going back to what you were mentioning with the previous coaches, they had some great teams, but even Lincoln Riley here, it was mostly just, we're going to have a lights out offense and suspect defensive play. And if you can get the offense, like if we just outscore everybody, people are going to have to score 40 or 50 to beat us. Well, I mean, that works, but how often can you count on that? So I don't know. Oklahoma's an interesting case. I kind of like them heading in. I do think a lot of it depends, as it always does, on Jackson Arnold. To me, they're very similar to Auburn, at times under Gus Malzahn. I will say that. Under Gus Malzahn, Auburn had some really, really good defenses. And it was always a question, was the offense going to be consistent enough? And so that's kind of how I view Oklahoma heading into 2024 is they could have a good defense. They return, I believe, it's like 11 of their top 13 tacklers from last year. Like they're going to bring back a lot of guys. But, continuity is always good, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be better. So I kind of have them. I had them at like 8 wins this year, which kind of fits into what you were saying. But if the fan expectation is for Oklahoma to just come in and win 9, 10, 11 games and have a berth in Atlanta, I would pump the brakes on that just a little bit.
Yeah, breathe for a second.
Yeah.
2 questions before we let you go, Bryce, and I hope that this is something that you'll come on frequently as you can on Georgia Alabama Sports Live within our audience around here, man. We appreciate it as always. One, I guess we'll stay in the SEC, and then I'll hold off on my last question. Lane Kiffin. I look at what he returns. 10 starters on offense, 10 starters on defense. I know you respect Phil Steele magazine. I mean, if you are covering college football, you probably got the Phil Steele Preview magazine. Josh Pate has always been a big proponent of it, and so am I. I looked at everything they return. I look at the schedule. I look at the fact that Nick Saban's not there anymore. And they play Georgia at home. Does Ole Miss, is this the year that they finally take it and make it to Atlanta? And if it's not this year, will it ever be done for Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss? Because you may mention Oklahoma, Texas, all these schools are going to get better. And Ole Miss, is as great as the story as it has been for Lane, I don't think he wants to be there for 15 years. I think a big job's going to be coming to him if he is really successful this year again. What's your expectations with Ole Miss? And do you agree with me, if it ain't this year, everything with Jackson Dart and all the talent they got, it may not ever happen?
So 2 things on that. I will start with Lane Kiffin has Ole Miss in a spot they have not been in since the 50s. And in terms of like modern day college football, just with the excitement level, with the talent that they have, and just wins wise, I mean, they've been very, very good. So I will say, if they don't reach Atlanta this year, and I'm an Ole Miss fan, I'm disappointed, because if it's not going to happen now, you literally destroyed the portal. Like, you raided the portal. You have really good defensive pieces. You kept a lot of really good defensive pieces there. Offensively, you lost Quinshon Judkins, but then you brought in like 16 running backs. I mean, I don't know if you guys have kept up with that. Like, they literally have like a minor league team of running backs that they could run out there. It's wild. So, yeah, and then Jackson Dart, like, I think he's underrated in terms of when you compare him against Ewers and Carson Beck. Like, I think if Dart was at Georgia, we'd be thinking a little bit differently about him, just with the weapons they have around him. Now, look, you're not going to knock Carson Beck because of that. He's still a really good quarterback, but I think Dart's good. And I'll say part of it too, I was in person for that LSU Ole Miss game last year and saw up close how explosive they can be. And just, I was on the sideline and just watched Lane Kiffin, the way that he just runs that offense. It's really something to, like, I think that young coaches should watch about how he orchestrates an offensive drive, just in crunch time, like the way he communicates everything to a T. It's just buttoned up the way they do things. And then Pete Golding, like, Alabama fans wanted to get rid of him. He's not that bad of a defensive coordinator.
No.
Like, and we were talking about Oklahoma earlier. Like, I mean, Ole Miss is going to score 30, 40 points. I mean, they're going to do that. If they can hold their opponents to 25, 30 points, they're going to win a majority of their ball games. So I think truly, if they don't make it to Atlanta this year, I don't know when. Because to me, and you were talking about it with Bam earlier, the only thing that we felt like holding him back was that guy in Tuscaloosa. And he's gone, like you said. But I don't think Kalen DeBoer and Alabama are going to completely fall off. So if you're going to beat them, you've got to beat them in year one as he's getting his feet wet. Like, you have to beat him right now. LSU, Brian Kelly, they're going to come down to Baton Rouge. That's going to be it's going to be a night game in Death Valley, which is wild. But like we talked about, there's a lot of questions defensively. So, like, if you're going to get them, you got to get them there. Like, I think LSU is only going to continue to get better with the way they're recruiting. So it just feels like it's now or never. There's a lot of teams that have some questions. And like you said, Thrift, they're just not for me, a glaring question mark on Ole Miss's roster. It's going to come down to, do they shoot themselves in the foot? Do they lose a game they shouldn't? At the end of the day, like, if they're not standing in Atlanta for the SEC title game with a chance to go, be the SEC's automatic bid representative, that's disappointing. Because if it's not now, then I don't know how much better of a program or a current roster you can build in Oxford. And to your point, if they don't win and some type of big job comes open, like, Lane Kiffin's got to look at it and be like, guys, we can't do anything better here. Like, this is as good as it's going to get at Ole Miss potentially. So we'll see.
Yeah, we will. The Grove, they're pretty upset at both of us right now, Bryce, because they are thinking this is finally the year. Final question. We're talking Georgia Tech football here on Georgia Alabama Sports Live, as we should. A couple things. Do you believe that Brent Key was the right hire? Do you think that he is going to take Georgia Tech to a level that can be – we just want them to win 8-9 games in the ACC, which is – if you get half the talent that's in Atlanta, 1/4 of the talent, you're going to be competitive and maybe win ACC championships. You think they should have gone outside? Tell me what you think about Georgia Tech this year, and what do you think that this could possibly be for them after going 6-6 last year?
I actually think, and I've talked with people who have started to pay a little bit more attention to Georgia Tech nationally. Brent, that program, I mean, man, I covered it. They won 9 games in 3 years. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It was bad. And they really, at a time where college football, you needed to have brand value and be noticeable, Georgia Tech was nowhere to be seen. And it hurt them big time in recruiting, in the NIL era. It devastated them. And so what Brent Key did last year to get them to a bowl game, to be really competitive in that clean old-fashioned hate game last year against Georgia, to where a lot of people look at that game and say Georgia kind of won that late. You go back and look at it. If a linebacker for Georgia Tech makes a tackle on like 3rd and 4, Tech's going to get the ball back with about a minute and a half left with a chance to go tie the football game. Yeah. Georgia fans don't want to talk about that. And Thrift, you do. I grew up a Georgia fan. Like, people don't want to talk about that. So I think what he has done in terms of excitement around the program, and then just getting into these kids' homes and recruiting once again and having relationships, man, you could stay in North Georgia and you could absolutely, crush recruiting. You could come down to South Georgia. I mean, they've got a couple kids out of, the South Georgia area, Crisp County, Valdosta, all the way down there that they've been able to come get. So I've been very impressed with the way that high school coaches have received him after some things had soured with the previous staff. So I like them. They've got a tough schedule. They're going to go play Florida State in Ireland. And I don't know if you're going to be there, Thrift, but I'll be in the building when Georgia State comes to Bobby Dodd. And, I'm going to be there. And I have told people that is a game that Tech fans do not want to lose, but Georgia State wants to win so bad. There's arguably State's starting quarterback is going to be Tech's old backup in Zach Pyron. They've got a couple other guys that, from Georgia Tech's roster that are over there. And it's the prime upset opportunity, because you're literally going to be in Ireland, have to fly back. You're not going to have a normal week and then go play an opponent that it's a lose-lose situation. If you beat them, everyone's like, well, you should have beat them. If you lose, oh God, it's Del McGee's, tour of Georgia is just going to take off. And I'm excited to watch that too. But they got a tough schedule. They're going to host Notre Dame. They got to go to Georgia. They got to play Miami. I mean, Miami on paper is one of the best teams in the ACC, but we know that. I will tell you, I've never had a more fun live stream show than when I watched Miami. I had the thumbnail ready and everything, and Miami decided to not kneel the ball, and it was crazy. So, Georgia Tech for this year, I think if they can get to 7 or 8 wins, whether that's including a bowl game, they need to build it. They need to build continuity. They don't need Georgia Tech doesn't need a flash in the pan season where they win 10 or 11 games. I think they're a program that really has to build gradually. They won 7 games last year and beat UCF in a bowl game. They could win 7 regular season games and get an 8th in the bowl game. Then you're looking at a 2025 next season where the schedule eases up. They do go to Colorado and play the Buffaloes, which is going to be a crazy week 1 matchup. But they have Haynes King, who, like, you guys watch a lot of SEC football. He wasn't in the best situation in College Station, couldn't really stay healthy, but that dude's a baller. He threw a lot of interceptions last year, but he has given this fan base new life. And so I'm excited to watch them. I think they're a team to watch in a conference where after Clemson and Florida State, team number 3 and team number 10 could all finish randomly in the conference. You just don't know. So Tech always wins a game or two that they shouldn't. If they can avoid the losses like they had last year to Boston College and to Bowling Green, 8 wins is not out of the question, and you really start to build some momentum in terms of recruiting, in terms of just being a viable option, because not everyone can go to Georgia. So Georgia Tech has to prove to kids in the Atlanta area and in Georgia, you can come here and compete for championships. You don't have to leave the state. Much like Del McGee is going to try to do at Georgia State in just terms of development. So I'm excited to watch them this season, and it's going to be a lot of fun. That official week 1 matchup under the lights, that's going to be a fun one. I'm excited. I'm excited to be there for that one.
Yeah, I am too, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun to be able to watch, man. And you made mention Georgia State. Del McGee, and I think that's where Georgia Tech fans understand it. So do you, Bryce. Del McGee's in an interesting position, being in Atlanta too. If Georgia Tech's not careful, I'm a full believer in what Del McGee is going to create at Georgia State, and you don't want to be leaped over by a school that wasn't even Division I material 15 years ago. Think about that. Yeah. So I think
I'll add real quick to this. When Georgia Tech had their opening originally, I was a big proponent of the Jackets taking a look at Del McGee to begin with. People say, well, a recruiter, can he coach? Okay, I get that. Like, there's a lot of guys who've been great recruiters. It doesn't work out as coaching. But and maybe it's a bias of being from Columbus and knowing people who know him and that kind of thing. But, man, to me, I think that he's going to do great there. And I think he's going to there's no reason why Georgia State can't be a top 5 group of 5 program under Del McGee. And I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch, especially some of the underrated, under-recruited kids in the state. That there's just so much talent. He's going to be able to pull in some guys, and they're going to be some dudes playing up there in Atlanta.
Yeah, selfishly, I'll be cheering for him. Bryce, thank you so much, man. Tell everyone where they can find the Crowded Booth. I got to ask. Sorry, I'm sorry. I got to ask this, but you work for 247. You work for 247, and I got a subscription to 247. You did too in the past. There can be some unruly, unreasonable people that comment. Have you ever had to deal with that type of thing? Is that something that you knew ahead of time when you took the job, that maybe the fans are going to be unrealistic and they're going to make comments, or you were pretty much prepared when you took the job?
I will say, and this is all love for Georgia Tech, it's nothing compared to covering to LSU. And my first big taste of that was after LSU got smacked around by Florida State opening weekend last year. And there were multiple threads on our forum that were entitled, "Should Jaden Daniels be benched?" And that was, so when you get to that, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, I'm not going to engage with that person or that type of thing. I'm gonna try to rise above that. So no, it's nuts, man. But it's a good community, and like you said, I'll plug this a little bit. Just 24/7 Sports does a fantastic job, and the best thing about it is you can get a subscription and you can read everything. You can be a part of all the forums, and so that's something that's pretty unique to what they have, being able to read all the VIP content. So yeah, make sure you check that out. Great recruiting stuff as well. And then also, like you mentioned, the Crowded Booth. We're on YouTube, anywhere you can find your podcast as well. And it's a fun time. We're gearing up for college football season. We're going to have live shows 4 or 5 days a week, and man, it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. And we're going to be in Atlanta. I was saying, teasing that a little bit. We're going to be in Atlanta for that game, Georgia State and Georgia Tech. So that's going to be a fun one to be a part of too.
Hey, Bryce, you're forgetting to mention you're also on WQEE.
Yes, I got to make a list, man. I got to make a list.
Bryce, we are broadcasting colleagues. We are both on the same station. I'm just privileged just to have you here on the show because this is going to be on WQEE. I just want you to know that. I mean, I think the station is going to be like, oh, is that Bryce Coon? We normally listen to him later in the evening.
No, yeah, they do a great job, and that's also heard anywhere throughout kind of that West Georgia area, East Alabama, all the way up to Noonan, and we've gotten we've been able to do that now, Richard, and it's just awesome. It's really fun. Like you guys talked about, I mean, anytime you can do this and somebody pays you, it doesn't feel like a real job. It's doing something you love every single day, and you never want to take it for granted.
Don't be a stranger. We hope to have you on in the near future. Look forward to
Definitely.
listening to later on with you and Ralph and Will, hearing you just take down the Oklahoma fans and their win-loss record. Thank you so much, Bryce. We'll talk to you soon, man.
Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks,
We're gonna
Bryce.
we're going to take a break. When we come back, a little bit more here on the Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show. You're watching right now the Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show that is presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. Get ready to smile. We'll be right back after this.
Make your way to Glenn Smith Chevrolet. Choose America's #1 compact SUV, the Chevy Equinox. Discounted up to $6,500 off. Chevy's full-size pickup truck, the powerful Chevy Silverado, is up to $12,000 off. And big Chevy Silverado 2500 HDs are discounted up to $6,000 off. Plus, enjoy no payments until fall. Make your way to Glenn Smith Chevrolet in Opelika.
Get ready to smile.
We're smiling now, and man, an hour and a half show. I told you, Richard, this is going to be a long one, and
I tell
we
you,
appreciate.
two guys with so much knowledge and insight on college football. You don't think they care about college football in the South? I mean, this is really what we live for. I mean, there's so much content that we could provide. Look, I'm passionate about sports, Thrift. You know I love baseball. You know I love the NBA. I am doing my best to try to get on the level of some people that talk college football. I mean, it's a different level. I was born and raised in California. They don't care about college football.
No, they don't at all. And but it's different down there. It just means more.
It just means more.
Guys, it's been an incredible show. I want to say thank you to Jonathan Rivers. I want to say thank you to Bryce Coon, talking all things SEC. We may have one more show later on this week. But we for sure will have Sitting with an Athletics Director, State of the Program, dropping tomorrow and dropping on Thursday. Richard, you're going to be going out of town, but we'll still be able to have shows next week. I got the Sam Mark Foundation basketball camp. I'll be live from either Monday or Tuesday, and then I'll be out of town. And then when we get back that July 30th week, Richard, July 29th, I mean, it is, before you know it, it's on. And we are literally starting our softball coverage the next week. We're already having live streaming games. So, and then here in the next couple of weeks, you'll start to see as we'll drop more coaches shows, more content, more people that are going to be involved with Georgia Alabama Sports Live, that we are excited to be a part of the team this year. So it's just content after content. And we're going to try to find a way, excuse me, we got so much to cover in terms of high school landscape that the Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show doesn't want to be on for 3 hours. So we may have another show that will be dropping dedicated to college and pro football and everything else that's happening around the national landscape, if you will. So keep a lookout for that. But Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show is going to keep doing what we do. And before you know it, Richard, we're going to be breaking down, like I said, that week, July 29th, July 30th, we're breaking down predictions, who we think is going to have great seasons in high school football this year, talk some high school softball and volleyball. I mean, a lot. So if you're ready for this high school football season, subscribe and like our pages right now.
Yeah, Thrift, we might get to a point where we could end up having just content like on the hour, every hour, like starting to become like its own channel, because, we might inspire other broadcasters that might want to have a show on our platform. I think it's great that we could just talk sports and have different opinions and different types of sports and just talk about just the stuff that you want to hear. The local content here, not only in the high school realm, but also college football, the great fan bases in and around the Chattahoochee Valley. And then this is what we do. And we just keep grinding away.
Keep grinding, keep doing what we're doing, man. I want to say thank you again to our guests. Braves are off, so really not much to talk about there. Falcons, can we get to August before we really dive into the NFL season? I mean,
yeah, that first
God,
preseason game.
Let's get through the preseason before
Let's
we
just
start.
wait for that first preseason game.
I can't do it right now. We got too much other things to dive into. My last thing before we wrap up is what's happening with the USA Olympic team. I'm worried, Rich. I know that was an
I am
exhibition, and in terms of talent, everyone that I listen to and respect says, albeit we're seeing struggles, and yes, the rest of the world has catched up, but the USA men's team is so far ahead and such a prohibited favorite to win it this year that it still, in my opinion, would be a massive upset. And I know others would be like, well, they lost the game for the first time in 4 Olympics last time, but they still won the gold. You still got Anthony Davis, Kevin Durant. If you look at the other teams, you got the Serbia with Jokic. He's the only player that would make this roster. Greece, Giannis, the only player that would make it from this roster. France, Wembanyama. Gobert would not make it. Only Wembanyama from France. For Canada, does Jamal Murray make it? Maybe over Derek White. He'd be towards the end of the bench. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander would be the only person on this team. So that means that this roster is so loaded, there is no reason. But I'm not liking the chemistry. I'm not liking what I've seen in these 2 exhibition games. I'm not going to be spewing out stuff that I'm going to come back to regret. I'm not doing that yet. But, Richard, I could easily see an upset brewing this year if USA don't find the right group, the right mesh, play the right system. You can have a lot of talent. Doesn't mean you're going to win. I mean, look when they played Canada. They had the worst first quarter I've seen from a USA Olympic team in the last 5 Olympics. Excuse me. And then also Australia. You let them come all the way back and only win by 6. I'm worried, man, because I don't think we've gotten the best punch from those teams. They've saved a little bit themselves. I'm hoping Steve Kerr finds the right. I know Kevin Durant's not playing. I hope he finds the right mesh. Joel Embiid has been a huge disappointment. But again, it's just exhibition, so I'm going to reserve a little bit. But calls for concern is definitely there.
Well, Thrift, I do think that they are in a decent group. They got Serbia, they got South Sudan. I think they get out of the group. But when you get to play
out
France,
the group's not the option.
Yeah, that's not that's not going to be a problem.
It's the fact that what if they play a Serbia and Jokic has a great game and they keep it close with us? They're now giving other teams the confidence to think, hey, we do this, we do that. We're more talented than that country. We can beat them. And being in France, that does worry me because someone like Wembanyama can make it very difficult for us to score. And then a bad call here or there. We've seen it happen before in the Olympics. Who knows? So I hope that Steve Kerr finds the right mesh, and I hope they do have a great showing in this year's Olympics.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the Olympics really all together, Thrift. The track and field events, the swimming, the gymnastics, the women's basketball, the 3x3 basketball tournament, which is a new event. And then, before you know it, in 2028, the Olympics will be in Los Angeles. So, I wasn't around when the Olympics were here in Atlanta in 1996. I was actually living in California, but it's just great when the Olympics come around. I know some of these countries end up getting bankrupt. That's why you have multiple countries that end up hosting World Cups. As you got Portugal, Spain, and Morocco going to host the 2030 World Cup. We got the United States, Canada, and Mexico. I mean, that's the way these countries don't end up bankrupt because you're building these state-of-the-art stadiums. And I'm hoping, Paris, they do have a lot of tourism. So I think that they'll do a very good job hosting the Olympics, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I am too. We'll have winners and losers later on this week for SEC Media Days. I think a big winner is Kirby Smart addressing what happened this offseason with the DUIs and not pushing it under the rug. I do respect him for that, and I can't wait to hear from Kalen DeBoer tomorrow and then Hugh Freeze on Thursday. Make sure to like, subscribe. Thank you to our guests, and we will see you next time on the Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show. Thank you for watching the Georgia Alabama Sports Live Show presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet and GMC. You're ready to smile.